You don't lose faith in love suddenly. It happens quietly. One ordinary evening when nothing is wrong, and that's exactly the problem. At 45, love no longer feels like a place you can hide. It used to soften reality, dull the edges, give you a reason to tolerate discomfort. Now it does something else. It presses on you. This is the age where the old promise breaks. If I'm loved, I'll be safe. You've tested it long enough to know safety doesn't come from another person. And worse, love can become another structure you have to maintain. Attachment theory explains part of it. Earlier in life, anxious attachment feeds on reassurance. Avoidant attachment feeds on distance, and both can coexist without collapse. But with age, tolerance drops. The nervous system becomes less flexible. Patterns that once felt manageable now feel invasive. You notice it in small moments. A message you have to answer, a conversation you have to continue, an emotional reaction you're expected to mirror. None of this is dramatic, and that's what makes it suffocating. Hedonic adaptation finishes the job. Even good relationships stop delivering emotional relief over time. The brain normalizes affection, stability, sex, care. What once felt like oxygen becomes background noise, and when love stops compensating for internal emptiness, the cost of maintaining it becomes visible. You don't think, "I want to be alone." You think, "Why do I feel heavier inside something that's supposed to support me?" Here's the uncomfortable truth. Love after 45 often demands more emotional labor than it gives back, unless it's radically honest and non-dependent. And most relationships aren't built that way. You've seen this person. Maybe you are this person. Career stable, relationship stable, life externally correct, and yet there's a constant sense of compression, like living in a room with the ceiling slowly lowering. They don't hate their partner. They're not bored. They're not chasing novelty. They're exhausted by being needed in predictable ways. This is where the illusion finally dies. Love doesn't free you by default. Sometimes it simply replaces old constraints with socially approved ones. In your 20s, dependency feels romantic. In your 30s, it feels functional. By 45, it feels expensive. You start valuing something you didn't have language for before: psychological space, uninterrupted time, the ability to wake up without emotional obligations already cued. And that's when the internal conflict appears, because choosing space feels like betrayal of your partner, of your past self, of the narrative that says love is the highest goal. But the discomfort isn't moral, it's neurological. Your system is rejecting chronic emotional negotiation. Mini story. He sits in the car after work for 10 minutes before going home, not because he dreads conflict, there is none, but because the moment he walks in, he becomes someone's context, and right now, he wants to be no one's. This is the age where you realize loneliness isn't the threat, loss of inner sovereignty is. Rule card. If love costs you control over your inner life, it stops being shelter. And once you see that, a dangerous thought forms. Maybe the pain isn't about lacking love. Maybe it's about lacking freedom. That thought doesn't comfort you. It destabilizes you. Because if that's true, the solution isn't finding the right person. It's reclaiming authorship over your life. And that leads to the next question, the one you've been avoiding. What if freedom, not love, is the last thing that still belongs entirely to you? Freedom doesn't announce itself as happiness. It arrives as relief, a quiet exhale you didn't know you were holding. At 45, freedom stops meaning rebellion. You're not running from rules. You're recovering authorship. Earlier in life, you traded freedom easily for love, for stability, for the promise that someone else would help carry the weight of existence. Now you see the fine print. Every deep bond comes with invisible clauses: availability, responsiveness, emotional alignment. None of them are evil. All of them cost energy. This is the shift most people don't articulate. Energy is no longer renewable. Your nervous system keeps a tighter ledger. Every compromise is felt, not justified. Freedom becomes valuable not because you fear intimacy, but because intimacy without freedom becomes extraction. Psychologically, this is where power re-enters the frame. Not power over others, power over your time, attention, and emotional bandwidth. Love that survives after 45 is love that doesn't demand constant proof of presence. It doesn't confuse closeness with access. Most relationships fail this test, not because they're toxic, but because they're built on mutual regulation instead of mutual choice. Dependency feels warm at first, two nervous systems leaning on each other, but over time it hardens into obligation. Freedom interrupts that cycle. It says, I choose you, but I don't disappear into you. This distinction matters more now than ever. Chosen love energizes. Dependent love drains. Mini story. She ends a long relationship that everyone admired. No betrayal, no drama, just a persistent feeling that her life was being negotiated down to size. The first weeks are brutal. Silence feels too loud. Evenings stretch without structure. Freedom doesn't comfort her. It exposes her. Then something shifts. She notices her thoughts last longer. Her mornings feel unclaimed. Her emotions rise and fall without needing translation. This is the moment people misunderstand. Freedom doesn't remove pain. It removes interference. And interference after 45 is the real enemy. Not heartbreak, not aging, not being alone. You begin to understand why forced togetherness feels heavier now. Your identity is already formed. Your rhythms are precise. Any intrusion is felt as loss of signal. Freedom restores signal. You hear yourself again. This is why the question changes. It's no longer, who will love me? It becomes, what kind of life can I sustain without fragmenting? Love is welcome, but no longer sovereign. It doesn't outrank clarity. It doesn't outrank inner quiet. This isn't cynicism. It's calibration. Rule card. After 45, freedom isn't an escape from love. It's the condition for choosing it. Still, freedom comes with a cost no one romanticizes. There's no one to lean on by default. No shared narrative to hide inside. You face yourself without buffers. And that's where the final tension waits. Because if freedom is this powerful, why does it still feel incomplete? The answer isn't in relationships, it's in meaning. And that's the next fracture point, not between you and others, but between freedom and purpose. Because freedom alone doesn't tell you where to go, it only gives you the silence to ask the question. And once you hear that silence clearly, you can't unhear it.